Hey everybody, how are you? Good morning. Anybody have any questions about the program, the Fillmore Pro Certification Program, anything under the sun that I can clarify? There's always some questions, totally fine. No? All right, let's get started. Again, for your benefit here, today's class should last about an hour and 15 minutes. It's really straightforward. It's really just a listing of those things that we want to remember to hold a successful open house. Now let me say this. When an open house is held and there's someone from Fillmore who's sitting in the open house, either on behalf of the listing agent or on behalf of the manager, or ideally if it's their own open house, please remember one thing, that when you are there with all the Fillmore signs and all the Fillmore paraphernalia and having been advertised in the newspapers, etc., 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 you are Fillmore. You're Fillmore. If someone has a bad experience, they're not going to have a bad experience with Les Newlands, they're going to have a bad experience with Fillmore. When you go to these open houses, you have to dress the part. It makes me sick, absolutely sick, when I see someone sitting there with jeans and sneakers on. It's not professional. It is not professional. It's not what you want to do. Why? Because if you owned that property, do you want someone with jeans and sneakers representing them on the sale of the property? Hell no, I don't. I want a professional. I want someone who looks the part, who acts the part, who talks the part. That's what I want. I want an ambassador for selling my property. So please remember that. It's the most important thing. And beyond that, and I'll re-emphasize this, many people who come to open houses, especially the initial open houses, are nosy neighbors, right? But those nosy neighbors who may be contemplating and thinking about putting their property on the market. This is what happens, okay? There's a neighbor who's thinking about selling their property. They see an open house. They make a beeline over there. Oftentimes they pretend that they're a buyer, okay? Because they just don't want to. And if you're there, if you're professional and you're articulate and you know the property and you try to sell the property and you don't have an answer to a question, you don't blow smoke, oftentimes listings are gained just upon your presence and how you carry yourself when you're sitting and holding an open house, okay? So just remember that. So, point number one, and again, remember, how many points are there here? There's 15. These are the questions on the test. So all you have to do is study these points and have a general knowledge. I'm a very liberal grader. A very liberal grader. I'm an easy grader. Okay, so here we are. Point number one. You want to have that mindset. You want to have the idea that this is a 2-hour opportunity, financial opportunity for you to make money. You've got a captive audience there. You've got a captive audience. These people are not running out. It's your opportunity to be able to put on your selling shoes and really demonstrate the fact that you know that property, that you're comfortable with it, and you can answer questions, show your knowledge, etc., etc. Now here's the main thing. For those newer agents here, one of the best ways to get buyers into your portfolio, to add buyers to the list of people that you're working with, is to sit in an open house. So there's two opportunities. One opportunity is that you're at the open house and, you know, from my lips to God's ears, a buyer comes in and, you know, maybe you make a sale. Here's the bad news. Only 4% of all the sales in Brooklyn come as a direct result of an open house. 4%. 4% of all the property sold in Brooklyn come as a direct result of an open house. That number has come way down from where it used to be. Why has that number come way down?
People are checking the internet. They're going on open houses.
Absolutely. Very good. Open houses are held 24/7 on the internet now, right? You can go online, you can see a virtual tour, you can see floor plans, you can see digital stills, you can see videos now, you can see virtually property descriptions. So the internet and everything that the internet has to offer has supplanted physical open houses in a big way. Many sellers most sellers still want to have open houses, so we have to go ahead and acquiesce and uphold them. So the second upside, the second opportunity for us is of course to get buyers into our portfolio. Now you have to be careful on how you do this, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But that's the second big upside, to get buyers who visit open houses whose needs are not met by that property. You're going to offer your service. As a matter of fact, this is so important. Let me just role play this for you so you're comfortable with it. Okay, a buyer comes to an open house. You're there, you greet, you do all the right things that we're going to talk about in a moment. Now I'm skipping 10 steps ahead, but if you remember one thing, I want you to remember this point and the way you want to address this. So I'm going to talk about it again a little bit, but let me do it right now. There's a buyer who comes in, you meet, greet them, do a little bit of qualifying and showing the property, you demonstrate the property, you build value, you point out all those elements that are special, unique, and different. You know, they have an objection here, an objection there. You know, you have some quiet time with them, and at the end of your showing of the property, demonstrating the property, you know, you ask them for collective feedback. You ask them, you know, give me some feedback, Mrs. Thompson, on how you feel about this property. And Mrs. Thompson says, well, it's nice, but you know, I really needed another bedroom, and these bedrooms are too small. So you confirm the fact that this property doesn't meet her requirements, and they don't. So, and she's ready to leave, so you walk Mrs. Johnson to the front door, and you know, you would have qualified her a little bit if she's actively looking for a new property, and if she's gone ahead and gotten herself, you know, mortgage approved. She seems like she's a real buyer based upon your earlier conversations with her. And as you're walking into the door, you walk her outside the door. It's ideally you walk her outside the door so that you separate yourself from the property that you're showing. You say to her something in your own style, in your own way, as simple as, you know, I understand that this property doesn't meet all of your requirements. I would love to help and assist you in finding a property that does. May I? And she says, sure. And almost always they'll say, sure. You merely give her one of your business cards and say, I'd love to be able to give you a call tomorrow, if I could, or later on today if it's a daytime open house. And you try to set a telephone appointment with her, and there's a new potential prospect for you. Now the ideal situation is that you don't want to be having this conversation while you're in the house, while you're in the seller's property. You want to be able to do it as you escort them out the door, okay? Now that's how you can get additional buyers into your portfolio. There's no better way, in my opinion, than adding numbers to your buyer portfolio than that. It's very, this game is very simple. You've heard me say this many, many times. The real estate game is very, very simple. It's a game of numbers. The more buyers that you're working with, the more quality buyers you're working with, the more focus you have on those quality buyers, the more properties you show to those quality buyers, the more money you're going to make. If you're working with 10 buyers, you're not going to be, in your entire portfolio, you're not going to make money. You've got to be working with a critical mass of buyers. And if you're working with 50 buyers, I guarantee you only 3 or 4 or 5 are going to be hot. Only 3 or 4 or 5 are going to be A buyers, grade A buyers. Only 4 or 5 are going to be grade B buyers. Most of them are going to be grade D or C buyers, and you stay in contact with them arm's length through the internet. Okay? And or by sending them properties. Okay? All right. Point number 2. Point number 2. If you are sitting the open house on behalf of another agent who's listed the property, if you're sitting the open house because you went to your manager to ask him or her, could you sit an open house in order to get more buyers in your portfolio, one of the most appropriate things that you should do is to, number 1, call the seller in advance and let the seller know that you, John Doe, will be hosting their open house on Sunday. Because there's nothing more embarrassing than for you to show up and the seller's there and there's that awkward moment. At least this way you had the professional initiative to go ahead and call the seller, to introduce yourself, let them know the time frame. Now, the listing agent or the manager probably would have reviewed this anyway with them, but this is just this is just a professional thing to do. Okay, so call the seller in advance, and a good thing to do is to ask the seller if they're going to be there. Why? Because you don't want them to be there. So if the seller is there, it says, if you're on the phone with the seller, say, by the way, are you going to be there on Sunday? And if sometimes they'll say, well, if you want me to, I can. You say, it's typically better if you're not. And here's the reason why. If you're there, it's going to be more difficult for me to get feedback from my buyers if you're present in the room or in the near vicinity. Because the buyers are going to be nervous to say something positive. Why are the buyers going to be nervous to say something positive? Correct. They lose their negotiating power. Very good. And they're certainly going to be embarrassed to say something negative because they don't want to hurt your feelings. All right? So, you know, this is true in life and also in real estate. You can't tell somebody to do something or suggest someone do something unless you give them a reason. For those of us who have children, you can't tell a kid not to do something unless you give them a reason why not to do it. So you want to try to have this conversation over the phone with the seller before the open house to avoid any awkward moments. Now let's say for a moment that you can't have that conversation, or you didn't have that conversation, or you did and the seller is there at the open house. You've got to extricate yourself from the buyer for a moment, go over to the seller and say, Mr. Seller, one of the most important things in me hosting this open house is to be able to provide feedback to you after the open house is over, or at least get that feedback to the listing agent. And if you're present in the room while I'm there with these buyers are always reluctant to offer their opinions and give me feedback. So I'd appreciate it if you have to be in your home, please stay out of the space when I'm showing you, so that I can get good collective feedback and supply that to your agent. Okay? And by the way, now that I'm on that point, if you're hosting an open house for your manager or for some other listing agent in your office, you should never provide feedback directly to the seller. Never. You should only provide the feedback to the listing agent or to the manager who asked you to sit the open house. Why? Because there may be a strategy in place, or a strategy that the manager may want to put in place with this particular seller in terms of a price reduction. So don't you give the feedback directly to the seller if it's not your seller. If it's your listing, there's no problem with you doing it because you'll be able to spin it whatever way you want to spin it. Everybody understand that? It's very, very important that you do it like that. And if the seller says to you at the end of the open house, and it's not your listing, and you're hosting that open house for your manager or for another agent, if the seller says to you, well, how'd it go? You're going to say, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to develop a report and supply all that information about the overall and individual feedback to John, your agent, and I'm sure John will give you a call tomorrow with it. Okay? So don't you give information to the seller if it's not your listing. Everybody fine with that? Okay, here we go. All right, point number 4, I alluded to this before. Dress for success. Dress for success. Not only do you want to be a good representative for the seller, but you want to impress the buyers who come there, and especially those buyers who may be sellers. You know, this is a crazy thing, but you and I only have 60 seconds when we first meet someone to create an impression. Someone forms an opinion about you and me within the first 60 seconds that we meet them. It's wrong, I know it's wrong, but people form an impression about you and I in the first minute that they meet us. And the first thing that they do when they meet us is they eyeball us. So dress for success. Number 5, strong recommendation, if you're sitting at open house on Sunday, get to that property, whether it's if it's your listing, you don't need to. But for the most part, I'm just going to make the assumption, so I don't keep on qualifying what I say. I'm going to make the assumption that most of these open houses are not your listing. If they're your listing, you'll know that it's implicit some of the things that I said. If it's not your listing, try to get to that property several days in advance. Number 1, just simple logic. No one likes surprises. If you get to the open house and there's a horrible, you get to the open house 10 minutes before it, and there's a horrible odor in the property, you're not going to be able to do anything. If there's light bulbs out and it's a vacant property, if it's a vacant property and there's cans and bottles around because some kids were in there drinking the previous night, you're not going to be able to do anything. Get to the property several days ahead of the open house and you know, walk the property. Now, here's something that you need to do. You need to walk not only the property, walk the neighborhood. Walk the neighborhood so you can speak a little bit about the neighborhood. If the neighborhood is very, very well kept, and the people who live next door and around the corner are very house proud, that's something that you can say to the buyers as part of your presentation. See if there's stress in the area, see if there's, you know, movement of property. There's a lot of other listings. It's just a smart thing to do. And something you should know, here's a term for you. It's not going to be on the test, but it's a good term to know. Most buyers are what we call pocket buyers. Pocket buyers. That means that most people know someone who lives in the neighborhood, who's a family member, who's a relative, who typically may be a buyer. Pocket buyers. So one of the smart things to do when you're sitting in open house, especially if it's yours, is to get flyers all around the neighborhood. Deliver flyers about the open house. Now, you know Fillmore does a real nice job at the open house of having the home brochures. If you're sitting in an open house, certainly if it was my listing, I would distribute flyers all around that neighborhood to try to capture those pocket buyers.
So you say distribute, you mean hang them on their door?
Hang them on the doors, put them between the screen door, the storm door, and the door. If it's in a condominium building, slip them under the door. I mean, homeowners associations don't like you to do that, but this is a one-off type thing. Okay? Pocket buyers, very, very important. Sphere of influence buyers in the neighborhood. You know, people who live in a neighborhood who are happy, they want to have friends and family and other people in their sphere of influence who buy in that neighborhood. They're called pocket buyers. Point number 6, walk the interior and the exterior of the property and decide your tour route. Now, in one of the classes that we've already held, you know what you want to do. You want to be able to point out those outstanding features in that property. And by the way, if you're sitting in the open house for someone else, bless you. If you're sitting in the open house, bless you. If you're sitting in the open house for somebody else, I'm not going to say bless you. If you sit in the open house for someone else, the best way to learn about the property is in the property description, because the listing agent should have outlined and pointed out all those outstanding elements in the property. But walk the property. Have a good idea of what those unique selling propositions are so you can point them out to the buyers. If in the dining room there's beautiful crown molding and there's a butler's pantry, you want to be able to point those features out and deliver the benefits and get the prospects emotionally involved. Just like you're doing if you're showing a buyer a property, okay? Build value and point out the benefits of those features. That's point number 6. Right? If it's a vacant property, if you know it's a vacant property and you're visiting it ahead of time, bring a trash bag. Bring a couple light bulbs. Expense them in the office. Okay? You want to make the space as presentable as possible. If the shades are down, open up the shades. Because we all know that more light makes what happen? Makes the room appear larger. Right? Make page number 8.
What if there's a horrible view out the window?
If there's a horrible view out the window and it's facing north, where there's a little light, close the shades. All right? But you know, hopefully, if there's a bad view, hopefully, what would the listing agent and the seller have done? Priced it accordingly. All right. Now, if there's a downside to a property, hopefully the seller had the presence of mind to listen to the listing agent, and if he or she had the presence of mind to price it accordingly. Okay. Properties that are in bad shape, properties that are in bad areas, properties that that don't have the value that others might have. If they're priced right, they're going to sell. We all know if properties have the proper price-value relationship, they're going to sell. If it's an absolutely gorgeous property, on the water, water views, great amenities, and it's overpriced, what's going to happen? It's going to sit there. It's not going to sell. So even a poor property with bad views, what have you, is priced right, boom. You know, let's use that example, not to spend too much time on it. If a buyer is in the property and says, oh, look at that horrible view, that view is facing the, whatever, the big trash compactor. Or you can say, if it's priced properly, you can say, well, obviously the seller took that into consideration and priced the property accordingly. Right? Yes.
You had said in an earlier class that there's a bad feature, you should warn them ahead of time. Is that something you should say to them ahead of time?
Frankly, that's a great point. Thanks for bringing that up. If you know that there's a problem in a property, this problem space in a property, it's always a great idea for you to incorporate it and to point it out in your presentation. If you know that it constantly comes up, if an objection constantly comes up, whenever you're showing this particular property, and this is the case probably if it's your own listing, it always comes up. Smart money is on you going ahead and bringing it up casually in your presentation. Why? Because if it always comes up, it's going to come up. And if you don't bring it up, the buyer's going to use it as a tool, as a wedge to beat you over the head. So if the property is priced right and has this indigenous problem in the property, then you can bring it up. I'll give you a good example, just to make it clear. Recently I was doing some consulting and some sales training on a beautiful high-rise luxury condominium in Jersey City that has the most spectacular views of Manhattan. 60-story building, Jersey City, facing Manhattan. And one of the lines in the building, a line is a stacking of, let's say, 2-bedroom properties that go all 70 floors. Same exact floor plan for 70 floors. Okay? It's 2 bedrooms, facing Manhattan, curtain wall windows, floor-to-ceiling windows, 10 feet tall, but right in the corner of the living room, there was a huge, round structural column. The structural column ran from the first floor all the way up to the 70th floor. And it's huge, and it's right there in the view line of the windows, facing Manhattan, okay? And every buyer, I was brought in and they say, the agent, there's 3 agents there that I was training, and they said, well, every buyer, the first thing they said, I said, well then, before you even turn the key to the front door, you've got to bring up that issue. And I said, you have to have some remedies. You have to have some alternatives of what people have done. I want you to envision a big, nice, round structural column. And I stood there for a couple of minutes, and I, just off the top of my head, I said, well, look, a couple of things that you can point out that buyers can do, and better said, what other buyers have done, is that they've gone ahead and they've everybody know what faux painting is? You can faux paint this, or sponge paint it to make it look like a column, or make it decorative, number 1. Number 2, what you can do is you can go to a glass guy and have 2 half-round pieces of glass cut out and make a coffee table at the bottom. Or you could actually go to a cushion manufacturer and have 2 half
seats
things for like a seat to be put there, almost like an ottoman cut in half and hollowed out. So I said, here's what you do. When you open the front door of the property, and when you walk in, you ultimately get to the living area and say, I know what you're thinking, what's with that structural column. Well, if I can, let me tell you what other happy buyers have done to utilize this space and to make it part of their living area. And they've made it, architecturally pleasing. And right away, bring it right up. So you take the weapons out of their hands and you give them some ideas. So if you have an objection that always comes up, I encourage you to have some alternatives and something to say. That way you take that weapon right out of their hand. Yes?
Also, there's a flip side, like I was moving from house to condo is great, but on the 2nd bedroom, there's the view of the parking lot, so the first floor, the dumpsters right outside, and
Right.
I noticed everybody paying attention.
Right.
So one customer came in, and before I walked in there, I told her there's some trash cans out there.
Yep.
And she's like, oh, I probably wouldn't have noticed.
Here's my point. If it always comes up, then you've got to roll the odds that 7 out of 10 people will bring it up or see it and not say anything, so you've got to roll the dice and play the odds. And that's why I preface what I was saying, if the objection always comes up. Now, with something like that, I would ask, from that particular view line, if it's a view line out, and it's a bad view out the window, down below, I would say, do you work? I know you work during the day, right? What am I getting at? At night, you're not going to see it because it's dark out there. If you work during the day, so you have to be able to provide some rationale and logic. You know, a lot of people raise objections just to shove it back in your face, just to take control, just to put you on unsteady ground. If you've got something to say, I've found something logical to say, unless it's a really serious objection, it kind of goes away. Okay? Not all objections go away, but okay, everybody cool with that? All right, let's go. Point number 8 on the bottom of page 1, make sure you have an ample supply of home brochures, a flyer display, your business cards, Fillmore brochures, blah, 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 blah. And the most important thing, when you're physically hosting an open house, your major job there, if you look at a job responsibility, is to capture all of the names and contact numbers and e-addresses and phone numbers of the people that came. And, most importantly, get feedback from every single buyer. The most important thing. That's the most important thing that that agent who's allowing you to host the open house wants from you. That's the most important thing that the seller wants. You've got to get feedback. And the simplest thing to say to get feedback, and do this with buyers on a day-in, day-out basis, if you show the property, just say, you know, Tom, Angela, give me some feedback on what you've seen here today. Can you see yourself living here? I love to say that. Because you know what? It cuts right to the chase. I think that's a punch-in-the-mouth question. It's a punch-in-the-mouth question. Can you see yourself living here? Everybody, in their own style, in their own way, must say that. Can you see yourself living here? And when you say that question, say it with a smile on your face. Don't say it in a serious way. Can you see yourself living here? Don't do it that way. Can you see yourself living here? You know, can you see yourself living here? And when you answer that question, there's only 3 things they say. Yes, no, or it's... Very rarely do they say, if they say maybe, then I would say, what's stopping you from moving ahead? Don't just let it out, oh maybe, okay, let's go, come on. No! Probe! Probe. If they say maybe, say, tell me, what's stopping you from moving ahead? Come on. Go after them. Go after these people. Don't dance. Yes?
Let me ask you a question about people signing the sheet when they come in.
Yeah, well, first of all, great point. Let me just say something. Never let them sign the sheet. Never, never, never let them sign the sheet. You have the sheet on a clipboard, and you copy down their name, their telephone number, their e-address. Because many people have crappy handwriting, and you can't make it out. Many people disguise their name and their number. And I'll tell you one thing that's true. It's hard to lie verbally about your telephone number. Because it's hard. Okay? It's hard. It automatically comes out, and if they try to conceal it, they just stutter. Like, oh, it's 973-41-225. You know I'm lying. Okay? So you capture the information. You capture it. You write down their name. You write down their cell phone number. You write down their e-address. And you know, yes, they still might lie to you, and they may, if they're really deceiving, they lied before by verbally, but at least you're taking one further guideline.
You also get the people that just will not give you any information.
Yeah, right. There's people who don't want to, and here's the thing to mention. You're absolutely right. If someone is reluctant to give you information, say, you know, frankly, the seller, the owner here, has requested that they, for security purposes, they want to know everyone who walks into their property. And unfortunately, if you're not prepared to give me your name, the seller just doesn't, he doesn't want people coming into their home. So I wouldn't allow them in if they don't give me their name, quite frankly. And don't put it on you. It's not you. It's the bad seller who said this. The bad seller who, for security purposes, wants to know anyone and everyone that comes into his property, and then turn it around and say, this is what the seller requests. I'm sure you would want to know if this was your open house, who's coming into your home as well. Wouldn't you? I mean, wouldn't you? Sure.
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
If they only want to give you a first name, right? A lot of times they say, my name's Dimitri.
Right, and what's your last name, Dimitri? Well, I'd rather not give you your last name, but Dimitri, unfortunately, the seller wants to know everyone who comes into their property for security purposes, and I'm sure you can appreciate that.
Can you refuse entrance?
Yes, yes, most definitely, most definitely. Now, that's gonna be your call, it's gonna be your call. Now, to me, if that's, Dimitri's a nosy neighbor, okay? And I just turn it around. If this was your property, I'm sure that you also would wanna know everybody that's coming into your property. But personally, that's your call, okay? Your call in being the person there. Me, I told you what I would do. Yes, question?
If you suspect they give you a fake number, just go over to this again and say, is your number so-and-so, and just change one of the numbers, and then you will find out.
That's a great idea. Yeah, everybody hear that? That's a great idea. Say it again. Say it
I do
again.
all the time. If you suspect they give you a fake number, even when you're finished, you can go over the number and say, is your number 6496255? Then they don't remember what they give you before.
That's a great thing. I've never heard that, but it's a great strategy. That's a great strategy to catch somebody lying. Okay, it's a great strategy. Question?
I have, in my office, sometimes they ask us, and we ask for a driver's license.
Really? Ah.
Something that I have done.
Ooh.
Especially when they're myself, and their mail coming in, and I'm like, okay, I have a
Right.
driver's license, sorry.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think it's legal.
What did she just say? She, in some open houses, she asked for their driver's license. And, you know, and that, then again, I don't know if it's legal.
I don't think it's legal.
No.
It might be invasive, it might be, you know, bordering on it. Yeah, you know, it's, I don't know the legal point, frankly, I don't know the legal point on that, but it's one way to really help, you know, your argument that the seller wants to know everyone who's coming into their property.
Basically saying they are who they say they are.
They are, and what's the problem with that? Right, 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 you're not copying down their driver's license number, okay? And frankly, you're not, on the sign-in sheet, you're not getting their home address, you know? So it's one way of just confirming who you are, and this request comes from the seller, you know? So that may be pushing the envelope a little bit, but it's your good call, yes?
In cases where you have people, we ask them, can you see yourself living here?
Yes.
And they say yes, but they don't submit an offer.
Right, okay, so, good. Let's go back to that. I didn't finish my thought. So, when you ask someone, you know, can you see yourself living here, there's only three things they can say. They can say, yeah, I mean, it's a great property. All you say after that is, what would you pay? If they say, the second thing they can say is that, you know, I like this property, but it's way overpriced. When they say that, then you say, I appreciate that, what would you pay? If they say no, I can't see myself living, then you want to find out why. Okay? And then once you find out why, when you're walking them out of the property, you can say, I appreciate the fact that you really wanted a property that has an updated kitchen. I would love to be able to help you find a property that has all these elements that you liked here and an updated kitchen. Will you allow me to help you in your search? That's how simple this is. Don't make it hard. Don't make it hard. What other questions? Yes?
At the point of asking for a driver's license, if you ask for an ID, it's allowable, but if you ask for a driver's license and the person don't drive, then it's considered to be discriminatory.
Ah, there you go. That's a great point. Where did you get that? That sounds right
That's
on
from one
point.
of the lawyers here.
Oh, really? Say that again. Say that again, so we can all learn this, because this was new to me. Go ahead.
You can ask for identification, but if you distinctly ask for a driver's license and the person don't drive, maybe he's a disabled person,
Right.
and you know you can't say handicap anymore,
Right.
then you have to ask. You have
Okay.
to say.
Okay. Just like, by the way, there's new laws coming out, and one of the things that you can't say is that this property is in with walking distance to the subway. That's discriminatory, because not everybody can walk. Some people are handicapped. Same notion. Same notion. So, that's right. That's very clever. What she said was that you can never point out that this is a good view because not everybody can see. And now we can go on and on with this, but let's move on.
Resale value, you ever want to sell the property, you get your money back.
There you go.
Say it's a quiet neighborhood.
The people can't hear. Okay. All right. Point number 9. Point number 9. Okay. When the prospects come in, you've got to warm them greatly. You got to greet them warmly. Okay. Make them feel comfortable. You know, hi, welcome. Always welcome. Okay. Always welcome. Big smile, and introduce yourself as their host. We're on on page 2, point number 9. Okay. Introduce yourself as their host. Okay, hi, how are you? Great to see you here today. My name is Les. I'm an agent with Fillmore. Your name is? Terrific. I'll be your host. Okay, so make it warm and ingratiating. Make people feel good when they come to the open house. Okay, and then politely get their information. Do not ask them to sign in. Say, you know, something that the seller has requested for security purposes is they want to know everyone who's visited the open house. So if you don't mind, you know, be a little bit. You know, back off a little bit and get that information. Okay. When you and then you know, if several people come at once, and the property is substantial, if several people come at once and the property is substantial size-wise, there's nothing wrong with doing a group tour if you have to. If it's a small property, many managers, many sellers, the listing agents recommend that you put a note on the door and you only take one person at a time. Lock the door, take one, if it's a small property. Why is that? If it's a small property, why do you not want to have too many people on the property?
Makes it
Smaller. Even smaller. So you put a note on the door and say, open house in progress, please ring bell, and then you can, you know, communicate and say, just be a couple moments. Yes?
I have a 19-unit condo I'm selling.
Right.
On the days that I'm showing it alone,
Right.
and I have multiple people, is it better to go show the 10th floor, or is it better to stay in the test apartment and let them walk, let them walk around?
With just one person walking around, or?
Well, I'll get, say, 3 groups of 2 coming out at
Okay.
a time.
Yeah.
But not that I can group them together and take them.
Can they get in trouble? Can they fall and trip on anything?
You know, it's elevated and then it's naked, there's no.
Yeah, yeah. That's a difficult scenario to deal with.
With one hand you want to sell the unit, and the
Right.
other hand you want to protect, you can't just have people walking.
Walking around, because there may be a security risk, there may be a physical danger risk. You know, that's the kind of scenario where you almost want to have people sign a disclaimer that if they trip and fall over something, because people just who, you know, just looking to.
At the end of the day, I gotta go to each floor, each unit to make sure there's
No one there. Yeah, there's nobody there. You know, there should be a control. I mean, that's not the ideal situation that you're there by yourself. There should be a control where you can manage the people. Because what happens is this: if you let people wander about, they're not going to come back to you. They're going to wander away. They're going to go around the way, and you're not going to be able to get any feedback. So you ideally want to have some sort of control so you can get feedback for the sponsor, feedback for your manager, you know, and feedback for the agent who lists the property. Was there a question? Yeah.
Yeah, on the flip side of having more than one group in the house, making it smaller, wouldn't you want that as well? Because it shows that the buyers, that there's more competition for the house. So if they want the house.
Yeah, I mean, that's Charlie, that's a great point. The reality is if you have 4 couples in a walking around a one-bedroom, small one-bedroom condo, it's gonna make it a little smaller. But, you know, if the doorbell's ringing, you can create that same sort of urgency. And again, it's your call, depending upon the size of the property, and depending upon the traffic. Charles is right. You know, if you can create urgency by having other people who are interested. You can also do that verbally. It's just one of those things that there's no right answer. You use your best judgment. But remember, if too many people in a small space makes it even look even smaller. Okay. Now, point number 11. I touched upon this. If it's a good-sized property and there's a lot of traffic, then Charlie, I'm definitely going to want to have as many people in that property as possible. And there's nothing wrong with a group tour. And here's what you say. I'm just going to verbalize this. It's written right there in point number 11. What I strongly recommend that you do is you say, folks, you know, there's four sets of you know, four sets of people come together almost at once. Say, folks, here's what I'd like to do. If you introduce yourself and you capture their information. Say, folks, so there's 8 of them there. Folks, what I'd like to do would be to take you on a group tour. I'd like to point out some of the outstanding features in the property that make it special. And after the tour, if anyone wants to meet on a one-on-one basis, I'm certainly going to be here for you to answer any questions. And before you leave, I'd love to get some feedback on what you thought about the property. And then go right on the tour. Now, there's one major danger between taking a group tour. That is because if you get one rotten apple.
Yes.
Okay, you get a rotten apple. It always happens, and there's a remedy for it. You have to have a little bit of guts, but there's a remedy for it. So you're taking these 8 people around. So you're taking these 8 people around, and there's one guy. And there's one guy who's constantly bringing up negatives. And you know who that guy is. He's the guy who was dragged from the couch with a beer in his hand, watching the ball game by his wife. So he doesn't want to be there. He doesn't want to be there. He's bitching, he's complaining about anything and everything. What you do is this. You excuse yourself with the group for a moment and say, Mr. Johnson, can I speak to you for a moment? In a very nice way, not in a nasty way. Mr. Johnson, can I speak to you for a moment? And you get Mr. Johnson aside, Mrs. Johnson aside, and say, you know, Mr. Johnson, based upon your comments and your feedback, it seems as though this property may not be right for you. You're under no obligation to stay. Say it again. Mr. Johnson, based upon your comments and your feedback, I get the sense that this may not be the right property for you. You're under no obligation to stay. And then don't say a word. And what his wife is going to go, John, I told you, or he's going to say it's not, and let him go. Point is, don't let him misbehave. Don't let kids misbehave. Same notion. If you let kids misbehave, they're going to continue to misbehave. So bring him back in line. It works. I've done it many, many times. If you do it the right way.
How do you take care of the kids, though? What do you say to the parents?
Yes, it says, you know, this is not my property. The seller is very, very particular. There's breakables here. You know, if something gets broken by the kids, you own it. Meaning you're going to have to buy it. Okay? So you wanna nip it in the bud right away. You know, I'd say, you know, the seller is very particular about the property, and if something gets broken, you know, unfortunately, you folks are going to own it. You know, I've said that a bunch of times, and people get the sense.
They don't care, they'll just leave.
And if they leave, then are they serious? No. Okay? All right. Here we go. We're at point number 12. Put on a show. This is your opportunity to showcase your skills. Don't make short thrift of this point. This is your opportunity to showcase your skills. You know the property, you know the outstanding features. Put on a show. Not only for the seller's benefit, if he or she are around, but also for buyers that you may want to bring into your portfolio, and or if any of those buyers may be sellers, if you do a great job and you're professional and you're articulate, and you demonstrate the property, and you build value, and you point out the features, the benefits, what have you, who knows, maybe there's a buyer who is a seller, who is a nosy neighbor, who just came to the open house. Many listings are gained by sitting open houses, I'm telling you. It happens all the time, especially the first or the second one. You know, frankly, attendance at open houses drops off pretty dramatically after the first couple. If you can sit in one of the first couple open houses, that's when you get the nosy neighbors who may be sellers. All right? All right, here we are. 13, it's a great idea. Now, some of the offices that you work in have this, but it's called a client information sheet. And it's a non-imposing one-page document that asks some basic questions like how long you've been in the market, neighborhoods that they're interested in, what their must-haves are, their timing to purchase, their motivation. And you can ask these questions as you're signing somebody in. Okay? It's going to be more of a sheet that's like this way. You can make it up yourself. Okay? But this way you have all the collective information right there, and leave a little section for feedback. because when you walk these people out the door before they leave, you want to get their collective feedback. Okay, 14, we're on page 3. I alluded to this before leaving, if the seller does show up, and by the way, always a great idea to stay 15 minutes after the open house. The open house ends at 4, stay to 4:15. Start pulling your things together, but stay to 4:15, because somebody always shows up a couple minutes later. And you know, don't ever put yourself in the position as you're walking out the door and someone's walking in, say, I'm sorry, the open house is over. Shh. Don't do. Accommodate that person, because that person could really be a buyer, and they'll appreciate a little bit of the extra effort. If the seller does show up, and the seller says, how did it go? Say, it went fine. We had about 11 people come through the door. I'm going to be compiling some feedback and supplying it to the agent your agent who listed the property, and I'm sure that she'll be back in touch with you, if not later today, tomorrow. Okay? And gather your remaining collaterals and signage, and then you're out of town. Peter?
Amongst everything else, you're selling the house, it's more important to telegraph the house. So many agents take one sign, don't want the balloons, put it in front of the house, they think 100 people are going to show up. You need at least 3 signs and all the balloons. You have to advertise it as much as you can by people just walking.
And that's wise words from someone who's been very successful in holding open house and been in the business for a while. You telegraph it by having as many signs, balloons as possible, and also by getting home brochures and canvassing that neighborhood, flyers to make sure that all of the neighborhood and potential pocket buyers can be captured. There's a question, yes?
I have a question about, like, seller dashboard.
Yeah.
Usually if I did an open house for somebody, when I go home that afternoon while everything is fresh in my mind, I usually enter my comments and feedback that I've gotten into seller dashboard.
Now this is your listing, or? No, it's somebody else. Go ahead.
And I was curious about that because you're saying we should really typically go back to the listing agent.
You know what? Great point. I would always go back to the listing agent and say, I'm about to enter in information into the seller dashboard. Can I review it with you first, just to make sure that you're comfortable with everything that I put in there? That's a great way of doing it. Great point. Great point. You see, if I was the listing agent, the information that the feedback that you're able to get from sitting in my open house, I'm going to use in one way, shape, or form to try to get a price reduction if I need to from that seller. So I may ask you to couch what you're going to say in a little bit of a different way to help me. Now, I'm not going to ask you to lie, but I'm going to ask you to write the information in a way that will enable me to use it with the seller to get a price reduction. Everybody understand that? So always go have a dialogue with the listing agent. Go over those 8 pieces of feedback and say, I'm about to enter it, just like I have it. Is that okay? Okay. Great point. Great point. Another question? We're set, everybody. Have a great day. All right. Take care. Thank you.